The following program is a production of Pioneer Public Television. This program on Pioneer Public Television is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4, 2008. Additional support provided by Mark and Margaret Yako Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHillFarm.org. The Arrowwood Resort and Conference Center, your ideal choice for Minnesota resorts, offering luxury townhomes, 18 holes of golf, Darling Reflection Spa, Big Splash Water Park, and much more. Alexandria, Minnesota, a relaxing vacation or great location for an event. Explore alex.com. Easy to get to, hard to leave.
My name is David Kelsey Bassett. Hip-hop music, when I first heard it, I was just enamored by it. I was in junior high, and Michael Jackson was very popular, and he was a moonwalker, and I learned how to moonwalk, and then I kind of gravitated towards hip-hop music at a very early age as a dancer. And as I got older, I got into other parts of hip-hop culture, DJing and MCing. And I never really got into graffiti or street art, but I've always been into fine art, minimalism. I'm in a hip-hop group that is called Sifu Hot Man, and I do the production for it, and it's kind of got a boom bap style of hip-hop to it. Guante is one of the rappers, and he's known for being a two-time National Poetry Slam champion, and he also does workshops around the nation as a spoken word artist, and he's very conscious and a community activist rapper. The other rapper in the group is Dem Atlas, and he's very new, but he's got a lot of buzz around his name now because just a few months ago the Minnesota powerhouse record label called Rhymesayers Entertainment picked him up as their newest artist signing, and so our project predates that, and we're continuing the project this year, so it'll kind of be a prelude to Dem Atlas's album, which will come out later on in the fall. So those two are the rappers, and then I'm the producer and the DJ. We have kind of a throwback sound, mostly from my production and the style and the content that Guante and Dem Atlas provide with their lyrics. Taking it back to the early days of hip-hop, DJs didn't really have money to afford expensive gear, so what they did have is some turntables, and they would find particular parts of a record, a break, a drum break, and they would get 2 copies of the record. And with the turntables, then if you're using your cue, you can extend a break to 3 minutes long and create your own music. So that's kind of where the music that I make is based off of very classic kind of hip-hop production and hip-hop performance. When Guante and Dem and I perform, I have 2 turntables and I am rocking beats, scratching, adding some parts during the hooks, cutting them in on the turntable. It's It's a record for DJs with little sound effects that have kind of become legendary, classic, whatever you want to call it. When the Sifu Hotman project came about, I wanted to design an album. I wanted to design album cover art that looked as accurate as the music that people heard. I wanted what they see to match what they were listening to, and what they're listening to is boom bap hip hop music in the style of the 80s and 90s. And so the cover work, the cover art, is an homage to that era of flyers, hip-hop party flyers from the Bronx. So it's got that element to it because it's got an element of party to the music. The cover art, I wanted it to be gritty, and I wanted to do it myself if I could. And so that got me to thinking that I could screen print it myself. I've done screen printing in the past a little bit, and I'm knowledgeable enough to know that people screen print album covers, and you can do it on the cheap. So I thought, I'll do it myself, and that will just add to the uniqueness and the authenticity of the project. So I decided to screen print the album cover art for the Sifu Hotman project, and that was how I first really got into screen printing. The reason why I like screen printing so much is because it's inexpensive, and you can make multiples. So if you want to share your work with people, screen printing is a great way to do it. So the process of screen printing is very simple. There's a handheld squeegee that rests on top of a frame which has a screen mesh. Depending on what you're doing, it'll have different mesh counts to it. If it's t-shirts, or if it's photographs, or if it's line art, those things will make a difference to what kind of mesh you want to use. But it really is just a squeegee on top of the mesh, pulling ink across the substrate. The substrate can be paper, it can be clothing, it can be hats. Most anything can be screen printed on. That's another appeal to me. I'm inspired by this openness and nothing matters. We met the wall and open shatters. And 1,000 pieces enemy of the state is what I became. One of the things that comes out in my art is a sense of isolation. I've lived in the area for most of my life, but for a portion of my life I lived in Minneapolis, I lived in New York City, and I really like the hustle and bustle of the city and the things that the city offers. So being out in rural Minnesota again, the feeling of isolation inspires me in kind of surprising ways. I like the dichotomy. I like to put I like to bring aspects of the city to a rural setting for a collage piece. A piece I'm doing for the Commerce and Consumption Gallery showing I'm calling Post No Bales. It began as photographs. A photograph of a Post No Bills sign that If you're in a bigger city like New York City, you'll see them all over as you walk along the streets. Post no bills. They don't want folks to be putting up advertisements on their walls. So it's a very typical thing you see in New York City. They don't want graffiti, and they don't want other folks trying to sell things on their walls. That superimposed on a hay bale roll from rural Minnesota, actually about 1.5 miles from my home. And so it's the dichotomy of the two ideas, I think, is a little bit snarky, a little bit funny, and speaks a little bit about the changes in rural society with some of the influence of the city being piped in through the internet and television. So it's kind of a piece that is trying to live in two worlds, and I think it's funny. It's got an aspect of humor to it, but it also is a nice metaphor for our times. I'm David Kelsey Bassett. I am a screen printer. I am also a DJ for a rap group called Sifu Hat Man. The music that I make is minimalist, boom bap, hip hop, and the screen printing that I do and the fine art that I am in love with is also minimalistic. Give me what you got, but you want anything just the way out of this. In the system of division, you are the rich.
Elementary kids don't get a lot of opportunity to do art at school because there's so many other things they have to do. They get music, but sometimes that's about it. The teachers will bring in a project here and there, but it's not a real focus on arts education. And there are lots of children who just really gravitate towards the arts. And I also believe that the arts are a way for children to develop incredible skills beyond just the art that they make, but life skills. And art makes us all more human, and we need it for our society. So, we wanted to fill that need, and so every year we've managed to pull together local artists. We always focus on the prairie in some way. This year it's just imagining the prairie. The idea of what could it be, what is it now, what would you like it to be, how would you like to decorate it, anything like that.
The camp is called Prairie Camp. It's put on by the Prairie Renaissance Cultural Alliance. The first day they made books and did a lesson on creative writing and drawing for our field trip that we took the next day up to the horticulture gardens, where they were encouraged to write and draw what they would think the prairie would look like 10, 15, 20 years from now, or what it used to look like 100 years before we were even here. Because our whole theme this week has been Imagine the Prairie. And, we're encouraging them to think outside of what they see.
Yesterday when we went out to the turbines with Troy Goodenow, I learned so much about how there was like a mile up of ice where we were standing, how tall the grass was, that the only living tree was like 3 miles away. It was a lot of fun.
I always learn from the kids. It's always fun to work with them and see their reaction to something. The best thing about pulling a print off the press is lifting up the paper to see what you got. And to see their reaction, it's almost like when I first started doing it, I had that reaction the first time. that's kind of what I wanted, is to be a kid again, I guess, sometimes.
I really like doing this. This is probably my favorite class because it's like I can do like whatever I want on these. They're really fun.
You get to be creative.
Yeah. At my house, if I get creative in my house, I'm in timeout. This is one of my favorite camps because it's like I can get together with a bunch of my friends instead of like just sitting down watching TV and stuff, eating popcorn. And I can just like have fun and run around, and they do like a little skit at the end, which is just a lot of fun. I just love this camp. It's one of my favorites because I can just, you know, be myself and stuff. Moment of truth.
Drum roll. Nice print. Nice print. I like that.
Well, what I like about Prairie Camp is seeing what the children create, and to see the enthusiasm that they have, and the attention that they give to their teachers to learn new things, and then they turn it back around and apply it right away. The kids are just wonderful, and we have a really great group of kids again this year.
I think it's a great situation to be able to teach classes like this, to have art organizations like the PRCA to be able to have a venue to teach kids like this and introduce them to, you know, music and other things that they might not see at this age. And obviously, a lot of them never print make before or done works on paper, so I think they were really receptive to be able to do that. And I think it's great to have the legislative funds, the grants, to be able to do something like this, actually see our dollars go back into investments in our kids, things like that. The more they're introduced to artwork, art forms, creative things, music, anything, that it helps them be a more rounded individual. So the earlier you catch that with them, the more it's imprinted, and the more they push their creativeness, and they keep their creativeness too.
I love it here.
Why do you love it here?
Because it's really fun, because you get to do lots of activities and all sorts of stuff. Like we get coloring books in the room over there. That's why. And today we played musical chairs. I was just starting to get a little used to it the first time, because I had to go out the first time. But then I got to this only to 2 chairs. But I lost when it was only 1 chair. I put these on too early and I was rolling it, and then all the flowers got stuck on one of the rollers. To like pick them up, and that's why my fingers are all crazy. But they were more crazy before. I just had to wash them off. But yesterday I like paint all over my face. And like everyone was like, "What happened to your face?" And I said, "Oh."
Actually, when I was probably 17, I went on a trip during my senior year of high school. I went on the National Dairy 4-H Conference to Wisconsin, and they always hold it during World Dairy Expo. And we visited a series of different dairy-related businesses, and one of those happened to include a farmstead cheese operation. And it was 4 brothers who pipelined the milk right underneath the road over to their cheese plant, and I thought it was the coolest thing that they were milking the cows in the morning and had cheese ready in the afternoon to try. And, I came home and was like, "Mom and Dad, this is what we have to do. This is the coolest thing ever." And I thought it would be a really cool way for me and my siblings possibly to have an avenue of coming back home without having to expand the dairy necessarily, but be able to build with the cheese plant. Most girls at 17 are thinking about boys and where they might go to college or what fashion is hot that time of year, but I was really just interested in learning more about cheese and how I'm going to make this end up being my life. And I didn't really think about it that hard or realize at the time how big of a deal it was that I knew what I wanted to do. I've kind of revolved around my life around cheese ever since then, and studied dairy food quality at the University of Minnesota, but I really focused on food marketing when I was at the U. A lot of cheesemakers told me that you can make good cheese, but it's really hard to sell it or market it.
How did Elise and I meet? Well, we know we first met in the Junior Holstein Association, and we had known each other through that, and obviously you guys have seen Elise by now. She was way out of my league at the time, and in college I tricked her and coerced her into dating me. Basically, we really got into cheese because even though I wasn't convinced this could be our future, we moved to Vermont right after I graduated college. Elise had a job that she enjoyed but didn't love. She still wanted to get back to cheese making, and I took a job with that same Holstein Association where Elise and I first met out in Vermont. So just 48 hours after I said I do to Elise, we got married just a few miles away from where we're sitting here at Redhead Creamery, and we moved to Vermont. And so we're by ourselves. We're a 22 and 23-year-old out in Vermont, no family, no friends. So we basically took a honeymoon every single weekend. And Vermont is a hotbed, and actually all of New England is a hotbed for artisan stuff, but Vermont is especially a hotbed for artisan cheese and has dozens of cheesemakers who've been making cheese for a couple decades or something less. But we were able to go, learn, steal lots of ideas. And after 2 years in Vermont, I was longing to get back on dairy farms. With my job being in government relations, I was in a lot of meeting rooms, but I wasn't getting on farms as much as I wanted. And I had interned with a dairy magazine in college that I'd always wanted to get back to, and that opportunity came up, and we did. Just so happens that dairy magazine is located 15 miles or 20 miles away from where Elise first fell in love with the idea of farmstead cheesemaking. So we again swindled her way into getting a job there, and they were great people to work with, and so we lived right in the middle of my job and her job, and both were, at least at the time, what we thought was living our dream.
After that, I was pregnant with our daughter Lucy, and we decided that we wanted her to be growing up on the farm. So she was actually only 3 weeks old before we moved back home, and it's been just a little over 2 years now that we've been back home, and we're very family oriented, and I really enjoyed that, and I wanted to be able to instill that on my current family, future family, and give my daughter the opportunity to experience that as well. Lucy does go to daycare, but she still has this experience of dealing with people, and she'll know where her food is coming from, how it's made, and I think that's a really cool opportunity for her and any future children we may have, and anyone that we bring here. I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing without the support of my parents. They have basically been there through the entire process, from me saying I want to make cheese to encouraging me through the classes that I didn't necessarily do well in college, like chemistry or other things, but they were always there supporting me and encouraging me to keep learning. I just really wouldn't have been able to do it without their support, and I really appreciate what they've done for us so far and continue to do.
Did we have hiccups? Did we ever? So we started getting permitting for this plant in June and July of 2013. And at the time we thought, wow, this is going to be a breeze. We'll be up and running by January 1st and be shipping out our first cheeses by Memorial Day 2013. Well, we didn't really start making cheese in earnest until Halloween of 2014, so 6 months after we hoped. A couple things held us back. We had a really hard winter last winter, so obviously our construction workers did their best, but it was cold outside and everybody works a little slower. July 4th we tried making cheese. Things weren't hooked up right. Later in July, we tried making cheese, and again we wrecked the vat and had to send it back to Green Bay for almost 2 months in August and September, and then it just came back and had it set up for Halloween. So finally, 6 months later, we've been able to be going, and we've been going for, knock on wood, 3 weeks straight now with no problems, and we think we've done everything we could to prevent it. One of the really cool things that happened by us being delayed through all this process, if we would have started up in July, we probably just would have started making cheese and called it good and tried to find a wholesaler and go from there. But since we had a few extra months, we were able to make this store and event room, which has literally saved us, allowed us to have something for people to come look at, even when we didn't have cheese a few months ago and didn't know if we were ever going to get cheese. We could still schedule events here. So we've hosted things like a cheese and wine tasting, painting and cupcake day with one of our friends from Morris, and we hope to do lots more cheese education classes. And so now we're able to do that and put it all together. When Elise is actually talking about what equipment she's using, she can show them exactly what equipment she's using to make the cheese.
Do I ever get sick of cheese? No, I don't think I ever will. From quality assurance testing while we're making cheese to my dinner tonight will probably involve cheese of some occasions. I feel like if you surround yourself with good people, your life is that much more pleasant and enjoyable. And I wanted to deal with something, cheese especially, just makes people happy. I don't know anyone that gets upset from having really good cheese and wine or beer, and it's just a really fun, it's a fun culture and experience. The people in this industry are just awesome. They're all very sharing and want to communicate with you and help you when you struggle. I text cheesemakers that I know on a regular basis just asking for help because I don't always know what I'm doing. So it's a really cool industry, and it's really fun to be part of multiple aspects of the dairy industry that not everyone gets to have a part of.
This program on Pioneer Public Television is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. Additional support provided by Mark and Margaret Yackel-Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHillFarm.org. The Arrowwood Resort and Conference Center, your ideal choice for Minnesota resorts offering luxury townhomes, 18 holes of golf, Darling Reflection Spa, Big Splash Water Park, and much more. Alexandria, Minnesota, a relaxing vacation or great location for an event. Explore alex.com. Easy to get to, hard to leave.